Indie music, a term that used to mean something but has been absolutely beaten to death. If you're anything like me, as someone that listens to a lot of varying kind of niche stuff, you might have run into a situation where someone's asked you what kind of music you listen to, and all you can even think to say is indie. But what does indie even mean? Does the term mean anything anymore? Who on earth is going to answer all of these countless questions I have about this music-related term? Hello? That would be me. I've got an interesting relationship with indie music. You might know, or you might not know, that I've done this series on TikTok for a while where I listen to every music genre. I don't want to be genre-phobic. That's why I'm listening to every single music genre. Today's genre is Vocaloid, Bossa Nova, Nu Metal, Hyperpop, Folk Punk. And I'm a firm believer that, for the most part, genre names are good. They're a helpful little tool, purely there to help you know what you like and find more of it. But I don't know if the term indie really does that. So what better way to get into it than to open one of my favorite big books, the dictionary. Some people don't know this, but indie is short for independent. This is basically the label that's given to any artist or band that's not signed to a major record label and is either signed to an independent record label or purely working on their own. And this isn't a term that's just used in the music industry. I'm sure you've heard of indie games, indie films, and whether you've known it or not, probably seen some.
Hi.
Can I help you?
Yeah, can I have a dozen red roses, please?
Oh, hi, Johnny. I didn't know it was you. Here you go.
That's me. How much is it?
It'll be $18.
Here you go. Keep the change. Hi, doggy.
You're my favorite customer.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye-bye.
And it's pretty straightforward when it comes to movies. Independent just means it was personally funded by a person or people that aren't working with a big production company like Warner or Universal, giving them unlimited money to make whatever. And if you're into movies like me, you might know that indie films can be some of the most interesting and creative movies out there, purely because at some level, someone had to really care about what they were making, about a certain creative vision, that they went to the extremely difficult lengths of making a whole ass movie without the help of big Hollywood. And you could sort of say the same about indie music, except the barrier of entry is a hell of a lot cheaper and easier than making a whole movie. And I'm not putting it down or anything, but as a creative that wanted to make movies for most of my life, it can be pretty unmotivating when you have a cool idea for a story, but every time you're like, well, I couldn't make some of the crazy scenes I want to without a bajillion dollars, 100 crew members, and a production studio. But if you have an idea for a song, you can just open Ableton and start putting sounds together. It's still hard, and there's a learning curve, but it's way more creatively fulfilling, in my opinion, when you actually have the power to make whatever you want out of your ideas. So that low barrier of entry has led to a lot of indie musicians. I mean, if you witnessed the whole rise of hyperpop back in like 2020, a lot of the artists were like kids. I would be listening to a song thinking,
my god, this is the craziest production I've heard in so long.
And then I look up the artist and it's a 15-year-old. But you might notice that while a lot of hyperpop is technically indie, it's not called indie hyperpop. Meanwhile, there's stuff like indie pop and indie rock, which contains some huge artists. How does that work? One of the most confusing things about the indie term with music is that it just gets slapped onto these other genres and basically loses its meaning and instead just becomes a description for this kind of indie sound. This stuff's confusing. But you know what's more confusing? The internet. Which is why I'd like to take a second to talk to you about this video's sponsor, Surfshark. Surfshark is an app and browser extension that allows you to mask your IP address and explore the very dangerous and unpredictable internet safely. These days, internet safety is as important as it's ever been, and it's important to protect your privacy online. If you're worried about being tracked or getting your data breached, you can block ads, malware, trackers, and cookies. But it's not only great for internet privacy. One of my favorite features is being able to use stuff like Spotify or Netflix while traveling, or even if you're still at home. There might be a movie on Netflix in another country but not here, but through the magic of VPN, I can teleport myself to whatever country I want, and bam, I can watch it now. Surfshark supports unlimited devices, and there's also a 30-day money-back guarantee. If you're on the internet a lot like me, I definitely recommend getting a VPN. I have been using them for years, and if you use code blustre, you get an extra 4 months for free. Link is in the description. Back to the video. When I think of indie music, there is a specific sound I sort of immediately go to, and that's basically a softer, kind of rough around the edges, bedroom produced sound. But some of the biggest subgenres I see of this are indie pop and indie rock. So let's just see what's in the Spotify indie pop playlist. Faye Webster, Biba Doobie, sure, I'd say they're indie.
Give it up for Biba Doobie!
Oh, the Glass Animals? Didn't know they're indie. Billie Eilish, my favorite indie pop artist. I've just been waiting for her to get signed to a major label. Okay, maybe they have indie rock a little more under control. Okay, Mac DeMarco, TV Girl, they're actually indie. I don't know if I'd say they're rock, but they're indie. The Strokes, my favorite indie band. Tame Impala. Okay, he's actually technically indie. He's still signed to the same independent label as his first album, which is kind of crazy. Also, did you know it's just one person? And I know I gotcha with that thumbnail, thinking Tame Impala, Nirvana? That's not indie, that's just mainstream rock. But Nirvana, whether you like it or not, was technically indie at first, and even though they ended up signing to a subsidiary of Universal, they were kinda super influential in what would become that well-known indie rock sound. If you think of a term like indie rock versus just rock, there's definitely a difference of sound, even though all that's specifying is that one is signed to a major label and one isn't. But if you think about it, it makes sense because a lot of bands start out not necessarily wanting to sound indie, but they're more so just limited by what they have available. A great modern example of this is with the band Car Seat Headrest. I would say they're one of the big modern staples of indie rock, and their first album, Twin Fantasy, was super lo-fi and not mixed very well. It was recorded in a closet, and it sounds like it, but that didn't stop me from loving it. They stayed independent, but once they got bigger and had access to an actual studio, they decided to completely remake that first album into the vision they originally had, but weren't able to execute at the time. Someone will get signed to a major label and people will go, they changed their sound. It sounds so clean and produced now. Like, that's kind of just what happens when you get a budget and a studio. But the weird thing with indie music is that a lot of the stuff that's considered indie music just isn't. So there's two main kinds of record labels, indie labels and major labels. There's tons and tons of indie labels out there, but there's only really 4 major labels, and they're referred to as the Big Four: EMI, Sony, Universal, and Warner. Now you might be thinking, Bluster, I know some other major labels. Yeah, well, they're owned by one of those 4. What's a 4-way monopoly called? Is there a word for that? What's the difference between indie and major label, you might ask? Money. That's it. The major labels got those bottomless corporate pockets to get you all kinds of studio equipment and marketing, while indie labels are a lot smaller, with smaller budgets, and can't really do as much for their artists. And that used to matter before major labels started doing stuff like asking that artists have a certain amount of social media followers to even qualify. Like, is that not your job?
We're a major label and you've gained our attention by building an audience, creating a lot of buzz, and even one of your songs has gone viral. Oh wow, this is the moment that every musician dreams of. A major label wants to sign me? How much are you offering? $2 million. $2 million? I can't even conceptualize having that much money at once. Well, you won't be getting all of that money up front at once. You'll be getting paid out over time for every album you complete after you complete it. How many albums will I have to complete in my contract? 6. 6 albums, that's a lot, but 1 album every 2 years, that comes out to be about $100,000 to $200,000 a year, plus album sales and streaming money. That's a livable wage. Well, you won't be getting any money from album sales or streams. What? Yeah, we will own the masters to your music, and that $2 million isn't a salary, it's an advance, so that'll just go into the budget of all your records and then be considered recoupable funds. So I'll use that money to make the albums and live off of? Correct. And then I'll have to pay it back with album sales? That's correct. So it's kind of just like a loan? Yeah, that's correct.
Yet another reason why this whole term and definition is just so fuzzy. Is confusement a word? I'm gonna use it anyway. It's the confusement... Dude, that can't be a word. It's the confusing line between the technical definition of indie and the sound of indie that creates this weird line where stuff like Billie Eilish can be called indie while also being one of the biggest artists in the world and very signed to a major label. And that's just because this specific song has a similar sound and tone to a lot of actually self-producing indie artists. And then it also gets fuzzy because a lot of these independent record labels are distributed by the major labels, or in some way owned by another label that's owned by that label. So then there's the question of whether an independent label is actually independent. So I mean, I could sit here all day and go through what artists are actually indie and what artists aren't, but at the end of the day, like I said at the beginning, as long as a genre label is helping people find new bands or artists with similar sounds that they like, then it works. It's doing its job. Does indie do that? I think it used to, but in its current state, it's kind of useless as far as looking for new music, and I honestly don't think that'll change. I think that if people get fed up enough with that term, then we can just make another one. There's no rules to this stuff. It's just words, and I think the more the merrier. That's all I got for this video. If you liked the video, feel free to leave a like, and if you really like the video, hit the subscribe button. It really helps, please. And if you're still here, I love you. The channel has been blowing up recently, and if you've been here for a bit, then you know I've been going at this for a while, and the support lately has just been absolutely blowing my mind. On that note, thanks for watching. Bye. Bye.